Hi and good morning everyone. My name is Mushahada Binti Fazli. My student ID is 202426418 and today I am presenting a forensic case study which is forensic entomology in Jordanian homicide case, and I will be covering the background, case facts and the units of this case. First of all, this case study was selected from 75 criminal cases available in the Kararat database published by the Jordanian Bar Association. To begin, forensic entomology is the use of insects to solve legal investigations. We use it to estimate the BNI, which is the exact time elapsed since death. This is crucial because traditional medical methods like rigor mortis completely fail after 3 days due to body decomposition. Analyzing blowfly life cycles gives us a reliable timeline when physical evidence is gone. Here are the facts: on October 9, 2012, a violent dispute took place in an apartment in Amman, Jordan, between a 38-year-old man and his girlfriend. The accused punched the victim in the face and head. In his initial confession, he claimed she lost consciousness and died immediately. He then covered her body with a sheet and left. Moving on October 28, 2012, which is 19 days after the assault, neighbors reported an overwhelming tall odor. Police broke in at midnight and found the naked body in the bed in an advanced stage of decomposition, covered by a huge masses of low-fly larvae. While the autopsy easily confirmed facial fractures for the brutal beating, the extreme decay presented a massive roadblock. The internal organs were ruined and the brain tissue was completely gone, meaning traditional medical methods completely failed to establish the exact time or cause of death. This left a severe forensic blind spot that only insect science could fix. What makes this case unique is the complete failure of traditional sciences. The autopsy report was useless because the internal organs were decayed and the brain tissue was completely gone. Pathologists could not determine the time or cause of death. Due to this forensic void, the court suffered from an over-reliance on the killer's verbal alibi, initially accepting his 19-day timeline in forensic entomology was later introduced to completely challenge the court's narrative using the insect data. This brings us to the core problem: a massive contradiction between a verbal confession and the biological science. The Court of Appeal reduced the charge to assault leading to death, believing she died instantly without intent. However, the inside evidence proved she did not die on October 9. The crucial inference here is that she survived in a coma for at least 10 days without medical help. Leaving her to die slowly completely destroys his defense of no intent to kill, shifting the crime back to intentional murder.
I'm Nur Erika Balkis binti Muhammad Azmi, and I'll be continue with entomological evidence. So when the victim's body was recovered, it was already in an advanced stage of decomposition and heavily colonized by blowfly larvae. The internal organs were severely decomposed while the brain tissue was completely absent. Due to these conditions, conventional autopsy methods were unable to accurately determine the post-mortem interval. Therefore, the insect evidence present on the body became an important source of forensic information. This demonstrates how forensic entomology can provide valuable evidence when decomposition limits traditional pathological examination. Here is the application of forensic entomology. In this case, researchers focus on Lucilia sericata, also known as the green butterfly. This species is recognized as one of the most common forensic blowflies in Jordan and is typically among the earliest insects to colonize decomposing remains. Since blowflies lay eggs shortly after death, their developmental stages can provide information about the age of the insects. By analyzing these developmental stages, forensic entomologists can estimate the minimum post-mortem interval, or also known as PMI, and obtain biological evidence related to the time since death. How about the entomological methodology? So to analyze the insect evidence, the researchers applied the accumulated degree hours or ADH method. This method is based on the principle that insect development is temperature dependent. A developmental threshold temperature of 10 degrees Celsius was used. Since the body was discovered inside an apartment, the average outdoor temperature of 23.4 degrees Celsius was adjusted to 21 degrees Celsius to better represent the indoor environment. The calculated ADH values were then compared with the known developmental data of Lucilia sericata to assess larva growth and insect age. So there are several challenges affected the investigation. The larvae collected at the scene were not properly identified and the body had already undergone extensive decomposition. In addition, the absence of brain tissue and the severe decomposition of internal organs limited the effectiveness of the autopsy examination. As a result, forensic entomology became an essential alternative source of evidence. By analyzing insect development, investigators were able to obtain scientific information that could support PMI estimation and assist in the reconstruction of events surrounding the case.
Hi, my name is Marahini binti Muhammad. I will be presenting the analysis of forensic entomological evidence used in this case. As mentioned by the previous presenter, the exact time of death could not be determined during the autopsy. Therefore, the forensic experts relies on forensic entomology to estimate the minimum post-mortem interval or PMI. Based on this slide, this is how forensic entomology estimated the PMI. In this case, the researchers estimated the PMI by investigating the larvae that found on the victim's body. They determined the larvae's developmental stage and combined it with the indoor temperature by using accumulated degree hours or ADH method. Therefore, this allowed them to estimate the minimum time since death. Alright, now let's see the calendar timeline that I made from this case. Based on the ADH calculation, the researchers estimated the earliest insect oviposition or egg laying occurred on approximately 19 October 2012, while the latest oviposition date was on 26 October 2012. Since the victim's body was discovered on 28 October 2012, the estimated minimum PMI was about 10 to 16 days before the discovery. That is why this finding is significant because it is contradicted with the accused's confession. So, according to the accused, the assault occurred on 9 October 2012, and the court decision was based on the assumption that the victim died shortly after the assault. However, the entomological evidence suggests a different timeline. Therefore, the scientific evidence raised the doubt about the timeline that is accepted by the court. So, this is the text that I extracted from the case study. It shows how the entomological evidence suggests that the victim is likely to die on 19 October 2012 and not on 9 October 2012 as claimed by the accused. That is why this has raised the doubts about the confession from the accused and the decision from the courts of appeal. This indicates that the victim survived for several days after the assault before eventually dying. Because the timeline from insect investigation does not match with the confession, the further investigation is needed. Experts such as forensic entomologists, pathologists, and police should work together to review the evidence, establish a more accurate timeline, and determine the true circumstances of the victim's death. I will now hand over the presentation to the next presenter. Thank you.
As an overview, this case involved an assault on October 9, 2012, where the body was found 19 days later in an advanced state of decomposition. The initial investigation confirmed physical injuries, however, the internal organs were gone, and the exact cause and time of death could not be determined. The accused was initially convicted of intentional homicide. However, due to evidential limitation and the claim that the death was immediate, the decision was later changed on appeal to assault leading to death. However, forensic entomology later provided a different interpretation of the timeline, which shows how scientific evidence can challenge legal decisions. The analysis suggested that the victim actually did not die immediately after assault, but actually survived a longer period before her death. This survival fundamentally changed the understanding of this case, as it demonstrates how the accused's actions actually met the criteria for intentional homicide by abandonment instead of accidental death by assault. This case demonstrates the vital significance of forensic entomology in criminal justice, as it provides an objective biological timeline that can either confirm or challenge statements made during investigation. By utilizing ADH to measure heat units for insect development, forensic experts can come out with a quantitative evidence that is actually more reliable than assumptions or confessions in the court. This is even more crucial in cases where it involves an advanced decomposition, where traditional forensic indicators like rigor mortis or lividity is no longer present to help in investigation. Despite its importance, forensic entomology has its practical limitations that must be carefully managed to ensure accuracy. The precision of a PMI estimate relies heavily on environmental variables, such as in this case, where the indoor temperature was estimated to be 2 degrees lower than the outdoor average. Another significant challenge in this case specifically was the original failure to identify the huge masses of larvae at the crime scene, which meant that scientific analysis had to be done retrospectively. Despite these challenges, the impact of the science is clear, as forensic entomology has the power to correct misleading interpretation and to prevent wrongful judicial conclusions based on deceptive testimony. Moving forward, the integration of entomological analysis in investigative procedures should not just be a scientific preference. In fact, it should be essential and it should be required so that we can achieve accurate justice and so that any rulings made in the courtroom can be backed by biological fact as well. And with that, I would like to end our video. Thank you.